Hey gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and t-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
Craig Minervini back with Jim Fox in the Rewind studio. And as you know, in the RHI game, only 4 skaters aside. You don't have the center, left wing, right wing situation. So the coaches have big decisions. Not only who to put out, but where do you put your 4 skaters?
2 basic sets in Roller Hockey International. You have the 2-2, 2 defensemen and 2 forwards. That's a more conservative style for roller hockey. Also, you have the 1-3, 1 defenseman on the floor along with 3 forwards. That provides more offense, the up-tempo game that I think we're used to with roller hockey.
What about the other side? 3 forwards, 1 defenseman. If you don't score, Jim, that puck's going back the other way and you're in trouble.
Well, I think first of all, you tailor your style to your team. If you have the offensive mindset from most of your players, you go with that 1-3. But also during a game, you may have to change back and forth. If you're trying to protect the lead, you go to the 2-2.
And coaches know this is an offensive game. The idea is to score, so they don't mind using 3 guys up front. Another thing to look for in an RHI game. Right now, let's get back to it. It's Vancouver and San Jose. Mark Wolf completed his hat trick on this play and gave San Jose their first 3-goal lead of the game. Wolf was able to get the puck behind Mason as he moved side to side in the crease. Minute and 50 to go now. And another chance for the Voodoo, who have had the empty net here for about a minute and 30 seconds, and the Rhinos have had 3 shots at the empty net and have not put it in, and thus the Voodoo still have some life with a minute 39 to go. Brad Harrison coming in. Harrison to Zajankala, waiting, shooting, he missed the net. Minute 30 to go. Puck comes all the way around. Wolf is a good goal scorer. It'll be tough to miss here. Shoots, and there it is. He dents the twine with his 4th goal of the game, and the Rhinos just about putting it away now, leading by 4, 10-6.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
All right, let's get to it. How are you, everybody? My name is Tim Hanlon. This is Good Seats Still Available. It's the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for finding us, downloading us, putting us in your earbuds, however you're ingesting the proceedings this week. We appreciate it. And we're going back to the 90s, whether you like it or not. And a topic that we've kind of nibbled around the edges of in a small handful of conversations, mostly from a tangential perspective, is a curious oddity that just exudes everything about the 1990s. Of course, I'm talking about Roller Hockey International, RHI for short. We had a wonderful conversation back in 2018 with Rich Graham. That was our episode 81. So if you need a primer on what Roller Hockey International was all about, please, by all means, go check that episode out. Because like a lot of sports that we've talked about over the many years, this was a sport sort of born out of entrepreneurial zeal with our previous guest, the late, great Dennis Murphy. He, the originator of a zillion different challenger leagues in the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s with this one. This was his last crowning achievement. But also in need, usually, to keep buildings, expensive buildings, outdoors and especially indoors, humming in off seasons when said basketball team or hockey franchise or other sports inhabitants of said arenas or stadia need to be monetized, right? Whether beyond the concerts and the regular season of the original franchise. And this was clearly the case around 1993, 1994, when the expansion San Jose Sharks of the NHL joined the festivities in the traditional hockey realm. And they had been around for a couple of years in their expansion form. The first couple of seasons, they played in the Cow Palace, which was, and still is, believe it or not, still standing. Let's put it this way. It was a temporary situation. They moved into what was then known as the San Jose Arena. Now we call that, I believe it's called the SAP Center at San Jose. It's still around, and come 1994, the Sharks' first season in their new digs was the 93-94 season. Come 1994, summertime, talk about opportunity, and there were plenty of other arenas on the West Coast and all over the country, frankly, that would benefit from having some stuff, some programming, some sports going on during the summertime when in this case, the Sharks were not playing. We talked about the Continental Indoor Soccer League with our pal Ronnie Weinstein. Was certainly one of those, and a team was conveniently found for San Jose in that league. They were known as the San Jose Grizzlies, as we know. And also, we now get into Roller Hockey International, where the topic du jour, the San Jose Rhinos, were the franchise in the arena, in what was known as San Jose Arena. And we are blessed to talk to the founding general manager, if you can believe it, of that franchise, and you can wait for it, just the wackiness of that entire experience. His name is Brad Porteus, and he has a great memoir out that I cannot recommend enough. And again, I'll put this on the 10 out of 10 scale. It is called Roll With It, a trip back to the 90s, Gen X style. And to call Brad's ascendance into general managership of a fledgling roller hockey franchise in a league that didn't exist, I don't know, 6 months before he probably even found out about it, is the stuff of legends. And frankly, the kind of things that we live and kvel over and love to obsess about here on this show. So we're going to talk about Roller Hockey International. We're going to talk about the San Jose Rhinos. We're going to talk about the 1990s and sports. We're going to talk about a rivalry for one season. They actually thought that there would be enough of an audience in the San Francisco Bay Area to have another franchise at the same time called the Oakland Skates in the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum, what it was known as. We're going to talk about all of that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about ESPN2, the Deuce, its need for programming as well, especially sort of the cutting edge, younger kind of generational kind of thing. And that's frankly where we got that clip from, the dulcet tones there of Craig Minervini and Jim Fox. It was kind of odd because 1994, which was this first season of the RHI, I think ESPN2 had full matches. I don't know if they were live or taped, but I certainly know, and this is what YouTube tells me now, but I do know they also had or only had this thing called RHI Rewind, which was basically a conveniently edited and packaged 30-minute show, which really would have condensed highlights of a particular quote unquote game of the week. And they would intersperse it with some little featurette kind of things and some strategy of the game and that kind of stuff. That's what you hear Messrs. Fox and Minervini talking about. Craig Minervini, by the way, has gone on to lots of great stuff. You may hear his voice around this time that we record this show. He's the studio host for the Florida Panthers, still very much alive as we record this in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, but maybe somebody we'd actually like to talk about. He filled in on NBC for our previous guest, Tom Hammond. He called RHI games for ESPN2, maybe for ESPN as well. I believe he also called some games on the original UFL, United Football League, in 2010. That was another conversation we had too with Michael Hugh, the commissioner of that phenomenally intriguing 4-team league going up against the NFL in the regular season. But I completely digress. We get into lots of cool things and tangents with this conversation with Brad Porteus in a couple of moments' time. Jeannie Buss obviously is somebody, of course, we like to get on this show at some point. She owned and ran the franchise in Los Angeles. Let's see, the Murphy Cup, named after the founder of the league. This team in San Jose wound up winning the Murphy Cup, which they not too shyly put on the cover of their 1996 media guide as 1995 world champions. But as you'll hear in our conversation with Brad, Nobody seems to know where that Murphy Cup is, either for anybody who won it or specifically the Rhinos that season in '96. Brad had left by that time after one fun-filled and event packed season. But you'll hear the entirety of the story coming up in a couple moments' time. We'll talk about the puck, which is unique and not unlike the ABA red, white, and blue ball designed by Dennis Murphy to be a saleable item, something that they could have rights to, that they could get licensing fees for. We'll talk about the surface, how varied that was. In the case of San Jose, it was sport court, but in some other arenas, it was, shall we say, not even that giving, shall we say, or forgiving a surface. The Rhinestones, which was their very own dance troupe, all kinds of stuff, wacky promotions, and all of that stuff and more. With Brad Porteus, come up in a second. The book, again, is entitled Roll With It. And again, I highly encourage you to get a copy. Roll With It, a trip back to the 90s Gen X style. It is available wherever good books are found. Uniformly 5-star ratings on Amazon and other places. And if you go to our website at Good Seats, still available, just search up this episode numbered 399 with Brad and me. You'll find a couple convenient links to get either the paperback or Kindle versions as fast as humanly possible from our friends at Amazon. We appreciate that. And we also appreciate you giving a listen. And sit back, buckle up, make sure you got your helmet on. Because we're going to roller hockey. We're going to 1990s indoor roller hockey international action. Here's our conversation we had with Brad Porteus. We had, it was about a month or two ago. Only now can we get it to you, but we are very excited to do just that. Here it is. Please, as always, enjoy. Before we go any further with this fun look back, give our audience a bit of a sense of who you are now, what you do, what your life is all about and stuff, and maybe take us into 1990 or so where the quote unquote story begins.
Cool. So I'm a Gen Xer, grew up in California, and I've just recently spent a career sort of in technology, and it took me overseas. So I was living overseas in Singapore for 7 years and Amsterdam for 7 years. And during the pandemic, I got the bug to write up some stories, which I had thought I had lost. Spoiler alert is that there was a document I wrote that I actually did find later, which was really about these years that I experienced in the early 90s when I had graduated from college. And my dream was to get a job in the world of sports. And so I graduated from Duke University, road tripped back to where I grew up in Palo Alto, California, which I think is arguably not like what it is now, and was sort of more of a I don't know, average college town, let's call it. And I was trying to, wrangle my way into, I thought that, my ambition was to work in the world of sports. And so I, not as a player, but once I learned that there was jobs at these sports teams, that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't really know how to do that. And I sort of hustled my way into a situation where I ended up, to be honest, anybody who's in that position, when you approach any of these sports entities, all they want you to do at that point is to help sell tickets. So, if I would have been successful at selling tickets, then I could have worked at any team in the whole Bay Area, which is what I wanted to do. But I sucked at selling tickets. I don't think I sold a single ticket. I was broke. I grew up with parents who were cheapskates, and the idea of asking people for money to buy sports tickets, I didn't even have the words for it. But so I was trying to do this for the San Jose Sharks before they were the Sharks, and I was unable to sell anything. But the people who did sell stuff, we would send them a box of like swag, and then suddenly somebody figured out that I was a lot more useful counting bumper stickers and stuffing satin jackets into boxes and putting address labels on them than I was.
So you would be a promotions guy in the lingo.
Well, there wasn't such a thing then. It was just really like a boiler room of people and with a little closet. And so I think what happened was as that momentum of that boiler room grew, they needed somebody to be that sort of, but it wasn't even a promotions guy. It was like somebody ordered a bunch of swag and the boxes would come in and you cut them open and then put them in envelopes and send it out. It was just mailroom boy is what it was.
All right. Well, so tell me your the journey to that, because that hustle and getting that sort of that first gig in sports, right? We're talking about the early 1990s, right?
Yeah, so 90, 91. Yeah,
Okay.
91 probably. Yeah, 91.
And tell us about, so the Sharks, right? That this is, you say, before the Sharks. The Sharks had been was not quite an expansion franchise. It was part of the diaspora of the Minnesota North Stars, which is its own complicated story, but it was
Yes,
an
good.
expansion
That's
franchise.
good knowledge you have about it. So, the owners of the North Stars were these two brothers, George and Gordon Gund, and they wanted to move the North Stars to the Bay Area, and the league didn't like that idea because they liked having a franchise in Minnesota. So they prevented that, but then they allowed the Gund brothers to buy the franchise rights to the Bay Area franchise. And then there was some weird deal where they got half of the North Stars organization and players, or some weird supplemental draft or something. So the North Stars sort of got decimated. The team got split up, and then the Sharks. Well, it wasn't the Sharks. It was an entity called Bay Area Hockey 91. That was the organization, and I was cold calling them, and I sort of got, this is the entity that I ended up finally worming my way into. But they didn't know where they were going to be, which city they were going to be in. I've heard you talk about the California Golden Seals in your podcasts before. So they had played in the Bay Area for about 10 years, but they were long gone. And so there was sort of this question of where the hockey team was going to land. And San Jose was like chomping at the bit for being known as a real city, and had a chip on its shoulder and made a big play for it. And essentially the Gunn brothers decided that was going to be a ripe marketplace. But the problem was there was no place for them to play. So
So wait a minute, you're trying to attempt to sell tickets to a team that I'm guessing doesn't even have a name yet, nor
yeah,
even a location to play yet.
no name, no location, no anything really. And then the what was known was they were going to play in the Cow Palace at one point. But then they announced the name, and then the color logo, and that was actually already that was a big deal because I mean the hockey in California was already kind of novel, sort of before the Mighty Ducks and the huge migration south by the NHL. And the color scheme was like teal was radical. I mean, it was for the NHL just was such a macho image coming into like the Bay Area, and then you had this color scheme that was deliberately chosen to appeal to both women and men, but primarily women because the men they had black because every team had black. So anyway, this color scheme came out, and people were just sort of like, "Whoa, what is this?" And it got a lot of attention, and then the logo had a lot of edge to it, and was unique and everything else. So suddenly you had this Bay Area Hockey 91 became the San Jose Sharks. But to your point, selling tickets to play in the Cow Palace, which is about 40 miles north of San Jose. So imagine like having to convince people to, and the Cow Palace is basically a sort of a loser building that's like hasn't been invested in like 50 years. So it's not like you're selling a user experience. And the only promise of it's fun to go to the games, but the main promise is like, if you buy season tickets for the first 2 years, you'll be first in line for the brand new San Jose Arena, which hasn't been built yet. So it was a really tough sell, especially for a guy who couldn't sell his way out of a paper bag.
So okay, but so what were you doing then? So you were with the franchise for a fair bit then, both the Cow Palace years was 2 years, right? They were in the
Yeah.
Cow.
So actually, what happened was the scene I described where I was like working in that little closet happened as the Sharks got announced and we were selling tickets before the first year. So at that point, then they announced the logos and everything else, and then the merchandise operations sort of took off and they needed extra help. So I was sort of in the right place in the right time. And then one day, and I was volunteering. I was just going down there and showing up. I didn't have a job. And then one day, the woman who's running merchandising for the Sharks says, "Hey, Brad, we were wondering, would you think about you might want a full-time job with us?" And I'm like, yeah. So they offered me $18,000 a year, 2 season tickets, and I said yes on the spot. And I went home and called my parents and said, "I'm moving out." I made it.
And then describe. So okay, you're moving out. Where are you moving to? And
Well,
describe the day-to-day grind and what you were doing. I'm guessing you were doing. Well, I'm not guessing. I've read some of it, but we want people to buy the book for God's sakes. But I'm guessing you were doing quite a bit of a lot of things that maybe you didn't even expect you were going to be doing.
Well, I mean, everybody was, we were a super small group. There was, I guess, 5 or 6 of us. And I don't know, everyone was making it up all the time, which, in retrospect, all of this was sort of improvisational type of stuff. But
It had to
yeah, I
be
mean,
fun though,
mostly.
right? It wasn't just a regular a day job and kind of just wrote,
Oh, great.
stuff,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I was super happy. I was like, I had like 2 or 3 criteria, I mean, for happiness in my life, and it was moving out of my house and getting a job in sports. So I was super happy. Actually, so anyway, so what were we doing? We were doing everything because the San Jose Sharks merchandise just went non-linear. I mean, it just exploded in a way that I don't think anybody could have predicted. And in that first season, the gross sales of officially licensed San Jose Sharks merchandise was bigger than any NFL team, any and well, so it was basically the number two just behind the Chicago Bulls, and it was generated $150 million in merchandise sales revenue for a team that was like totally brand new and in last place. So this whole thing about the marketing around making the team sort of a novelty idea in California, and then also the color schemes, and then this awesome logo. It somehow caught fire, and the people who I was working with were, in retrospect, geniuses because they exploited that immediately. We opened 3 retail stores in the San Francisco Bay Area that were San Jose Sharks merchandise stores, and nobody had done that before, as far as I knew. The league had given rights to each of the franchises to keep the profits of the merchandise you sell within 50-mile radius of your home rink. So, our our bosses like literally got a map out and drew a little circle 50 miles from. I mean, I suppose they argued Cal Palace. It wouldn't have mattered, San Jose. We didn't have competition in the Bay Area, and we opened 3 retail stores, and they were just like nonstop, profit making, but also good way to promote the team because we're still trying to sell tickets at the Cal Palace.
Well, look, I
And
thought that the color schemes too actually worked to your favor.
definitely.
There's a retro thing going on right now as we have this conversation for 90s sports merch. It's like the hottest thing in sports apparel, memorabilia, whatever you want to call it right now. And I'm thinking like Vancouver Grizzlies and the Sharks, and there's just the bagginess of like the jackets and that kind of stuff. You wouldn't have known it at the time, but you kind of had something really hot there that maybe you just didn't realize.
Well, I think we sort of began to realize it because it got so big so fast. And the guys who I hung around with, my buddies, they were obviously, sort of psyched that their friend had this job, and we would go out and whatever, and then you'd see somebody wearing a Sharks hat, and one of my buddies would say hat, like under his breath, hat, and we'd look around like, oh, there's a guy wearing a Sharks hat, because it was like still novel. And then it's like the first time you see a Tesla or something, and next thing whatever, right? It's novel, but then it's like bumper sticker, license plate frame, and then it got to be so boring because it was sort of everywhere. So suddenly, like this whole phenomenon was huge, and so I was warehouse boy. We were doing a mail order business. We had international, yeah. So we had in arena game sales, and then the 3 retail stores in the Bay Area. And then we did a global international mail order business. And the woman I worked for, Mary Keene, she was just a genius sort of merchandiser. And we did these like glossy magazines or like catalogs with all sorts of products, and nobody had really done that either. Before that, you could sort of only just buy sports merchandise through like the Sears catalog or something, right? So suddenly this was more like competing with like I don't know, like a fashion catalog. Because you have to remember, in the 90s, that's how we bought stuff, right? You'd get the catalog in the mail and flip through it and order some shit and send off your
Mm.
your order, and it would come back. So this whole mail order thing was actually also pretty big, and we then had fans like all over the world. We were sending stuff in weird places eventually, because our players, obviously the NFL are from NHL are from all over the place. So I remember sending stuff to Finland and Sweden and all sorts of places.
All right, so tell me about those first 2 years, and then I'm sure everybody was just eyeing the move and the construction and the timing of hopefully what would be the third season.
Yeah, it was a big countdown, right? Because I mean, as you can sort of see the building going up, and it was definitely better than anything the Bay Area had for sure. It was super high tech and modern, and the San Jose was leaning into the tech thing, so everybody knew the building was just going to be spectacular. So it was literally a countdown, and year two was grim because the Sharks were 11-71-2.
I remember that season. Yeah, I remember
11,
following that.
71 and 2. And at one point, I think there was a 17 game losing streak. It might have been 19 games. And then there's like a 13 game losing streak. So it was rough because actually by then the novelty has sort of a bit worn off the season ticket holders of the first, who bought tickets for the first 2 years. By then they'd been to a lot of games. And so it was a little lackluster. So we would try to do everything we could to make it fun in the arena. But everybody sort of at the Cow Palace, but everybody knew it was a countdown until the new arena happened. And it was logistically a pain as well, being like 40 miles away from San Jose, and everybody wanted to be closer, et cetera, et cetera. So that was like going to be like this big moment. We were graduating into the new arena. The bad season behind us. I think we got a new coach, and so there's like a huge fresh start. And the team I was part of, we moved into this killer warehouse that was also more convenient down in San Jose, and things were just getting bigger. And it was great. And then one day, I go to work, and our boss says, yeah, well, so guess what? No big deal, but our merchandise operations. So with the new arena being built, oh, one of the things was in the arena, there was this gigantic shark store. So it was like the huge, amazing in the whole foyer, open lobby, 24/7, not 24/7, but open all the time merchandise store. Like, this is going to be great. We have this great store. Well, we were pretty stupid because anybody who sort of knows this business knows that arena management is not really run by the teams. It's like corporate entities who know how to run these operations and staff them and do all the food and all the beverage and the hospitality and the merchandise and et cetera. So sure enough, the arena and the Sharks had licensed out, or they had done a deal with Aramark, which was a big corporate giant concessionaire, the kinds of people who run these things at like airports and amusement parks. And so like our operations got subsumed by this deal. And I think it sort of went something along the lines of, hey, well, if we're going to run the Shark store in the arena, well, then we should run the other stores in the Bay Area too. That makes sense. Okay. Well, if we're going to be running the merchandise for that, we may as well keep track of the inventory for and we're going to sell the game night anyway. So we may as well do the mail order too. It's like, okay. So it was pretty natural that they would take over our operation. And in some senses, it shouldn't have surprised anybody, but it really felt like, oh man, I went from, having this really cool job with the Sharks, and we're about to have this awesome moment in San Jose to, oh man, I work for these corporate tools who are based, I don't know where else, and are like, scrutinizing the profit margins on everything. And I was like, this isn't really what I had signed up for. But I was feeling like really sort of mixed about it because I'd worked so hard to get into that position. And I knew it was like if I stepped away from it, there was almost no chances of going back into that world. But I got to a point where I was like, yeah, it just isn't happening for me. And so in a huff, I wrote, I was 22 or 23. I wrote some snarky resignation letter to these corporate tools, and I imagine they were laughing and high-fiving when I walked out the door with my stuff that very same day. So that was I guess, yeah, that was just a few months before the third season for the Sharks, which would have been their first in San Jose.
Right, which was a pretty amazing turnaround because they made the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. So where were you then in that mixture? And then where does this thing from seemingly left field come from that will your 1994 summer, shall we say?
Right. So it started even in late '93, and because exactly what you described happened, which was after I basically quit in a huff, I was like, what am I going to do now? And I was sort of thinking, geez, what kind of jobs are out there? And maybe I should work for a brewery, or maybe I should go to a ski town for a winter and work at a brew pub. I was interested in making beer. I don't know. I just didn't know what to do. I had a Labrador Retriever and a car and a pair of rollerblades. And so I was like trying to figure some things out, and then literally my phone rang, and it was Doug Wilson, who it was the captain of the Sharks. He's a NHL Hall of Famer. No business phoning my house, calling me. I had like five roommates, and someone's like, "Hey, it's for you. It's Doug Wilson." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'd read that he had been made a minority owner in a upstart roller hockey franchise and had been reported on in the San Jose Mercury News. And he had also just been sort of transitioning and retiring from playing hockey into becoming sort of a businessman. And it was clear that he was going to do that. He's just a really smart guy and well connected, well liked, and well trusted, and all that. So it turned out that he had gotten basically given, I don't know, 5 or 10% of this new franchise, which was bought by this Calgary oil and gas like executive who had bought the franchise rights to the Roller Hockey International San Jose franchise with their opening season in 1994. And so I sort of knew a little bit that this was going on. And then Doug says, "Hey, what are you doing? Are you keeping busy? Would you like to come and help out with the San Jose Rhinos?" And I was like, yeah. And so, I mean, I think I was literally watching Beavis and Butthead on MTV, and he calls and this happens. I'm like, great. So they invite me. So he organizes it. So the next guy, this guy's name is Rich Shillington, who's the owner. And next time Rich was in town, Doug got the three of us together and we had a chat. And then next thing I know, I'm being offered this job to be running operations for the San Jose Rhinos. And I don't even really know what that means, but it sounds really cool. So I'm like, that sounds good. And they're offering me to pay me $3,500 a month. And I was like, well, that sounds really good. So he's like, good. Well, then I'll see you in LA. We've got the league meetings in like 10 days. Come down to LA, just buy your own ticket. I'll pay you back and be at this such and such hotel, the Westin in LA at LAX for the league meetings on such and such date. So I'm like, all right, great. It's like, I guess I'm employed. So fast forward like 10 days, I get on my Southwest Airlines, I fly down to LA, from Bay Area. It's like it's an hour flight, I guess. I've got this ill-fitted like blazer on, and I go to this hotel, and the meetings had started, and there's 24 franchises for the Roller Hockey International, all in this gigantic ballroom. And so I walk in, and I'm like a little bit late, so they have my name tags there, and I put it on. I'm like pretty excited to see my name tag. I was like, this is real. And then so I go in there, and there's sort of like a hushed tone. There's somebody speaking at the podium, and so I come up, and Rich sees me, and he says hello, and then I recognize one of the other guys because he was sort of one of the Sharks employees who was going to help out. And then this other guy looks at me, and then he goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, oh, I'm Brad." And he goes, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And he goes, "Well," I said, I'm working operations," very proudly. And then the guy looks over at Rich, and then he says, "Hey," and then he whispers in his ear, and the next thing I know, they take off. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, it's dark. I'm not talking to anybody. And then this goes on for like 10 or 15 minutes, longer. Then the guy's speech ends, and then Rich comes back. And I said, "Oh, okay, so everything cool? Like, so where's Rob?" And he goes, "Oh, he just quit. He just flew. He's flying home to San Jose." I was like, "What?" And he slaps me on the back. And that guy he was the general manager. So suddenly I was a general manager, which, in sports terms means general manager is a big term. And I really sort of wasn't, because I was basically in charge of everything that wasn't hockey.
That's still a big job, though. It's a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Besides getting the players on the
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was just like, okay, how did this happen?
I'm sorry. Were you set up, though? Like, was that guy just waiting for you to be hired so he could leave, or what?
No, he was set up. I mean, so it was a double whammy, because I was set up. I mean, I think they knew that this was probably what would happen, but I don't think they thought that he would react that badly. So, because I think they're friends. Like, the owner and this guy Rob were friends, so I think they figured out he'll be fine. But he didn't have honestly, Rich didn't give him the heads up. He was just sort of like, guess what? There's a new guy. So he was like, oh, screw this, I'm out of here. So I don't think anybody saw that coming. But anyway.
Well, so walk me into walk us into the room here, because this is early 1994, right before the summer season.
Yes.
And 93 was the first season of RHI. There were 12 teams. all of a sudden they're doubling the size of the league.
Yeah.
What did you think about this league and the team and all that stuff
Oh
before
man, I
you
was
walked
psyched. I thought
before you walked in the room, and then maybe after you came out of that room? Because
well,
the facility had to hit too, right?
right. So I mean, so first of all, I was totally psyched because the people who are behind Roller Hockey International are famous enough already, and you know this, but your listeners probably many of them do as well. But the founders are like Dennis Murphy and
Two-time guest on this show. Yes, but rest in peace. I mean, we were lucky to get him in his
oh,
final.
that's fantastic. I'm going to go back and listen to that because oh man, I'd love to hear his stories. But he's a legend. And anyway, so there's four of them who basically it was Larry King and Ralph Backstrom and Alex Bellheimer. And Larry King, obviously from Team Tennis, and Dennis Murphy as well, and ABA. I mean, they're legends, right? So I was like, great, like these guys know what they're doing. And rollerblading was, I mean, I'd seen the Sharks like merchandise thing take off. Rollerblading was taking off. So this was like, hey, this is going to be great. Like hockey, rollerblading, these guys behind it. Like, how lucky am I? So I was pretty excited about it. Then at one point we went around the room. Oh, but they made some real mistakes. They actually did some things that I think were extremely smart. And then they made some mistakes. And I'd love to tell you sort of a bit about a few of those. But one of the things, the mistakes they made was they really grew too fast. I mean, that jump you mentioned from 12 to 24 was just a lot to handle.
Before you go further, though, that said, if you knew Dennis Murphy and his style, right, well, going back way to the ABA days, right, he and at the time, the World Football League he was involved with for a while, and Gary
Yeah,
Davidson and
World
stuff.
Team Tennis, ABA. I mean, look, they invented the 3-point shot, the slam dunk
Sure,
competition.
but
The guy's a genius.
But he's a genius, but he's also, his mindset was always sell the franchises first, and we'll fill in the blanks later.
Well,
right?
there was definitely a lot of that.
Okay, so that's my point. I mean, I think for those who haven't heard those episodes, please go back and listen to them. But that mindset, I wouldn't call it the hustle, but it's definitely a hustle, right?
There's a little bit of what people sometimes call shooting in front of the duck. I mean, I think it was a little bit of a spinning plates and hoping they all would stay spinning. But that's how you get, that's how you get something off the ground and there. I mean, but you're right. So let's talk a little bit about that. So first of all, I think I mentioned, when I mentioned the Gund brothers buying or getting the NHL expansion franchise, I think that was like a $45 billion. So just from a context perspective, it's about 40 to 45 million bucks, which nowadays is nothing. But that would be the expansion fee that the Gund brothers paid. Rich Shillington, when he bought the San Jose franchise for the RHI, it was $55,000. So he bought a franchise for $55,000. So to your point about Dennis Murphy selling franchises, like, he was out there selling $55,000 franchises. And then I'm going back through my notes knowing that we were going to talk about this. And the structure was they would pay, basically the league charged the teams $4,000 per home game as like an administrative fee. And then there was the league was meant to collect all sorts of like league revenues from sponsorships and so forth, which they sort of struggled to do. But the big thing that they were going to do was maintain license ownership of the puck. And the roller hockey puck was had problems in the first year, in the 93 year with the 12 teams. And somebody had devised, one of the four guys, I don't remember which one, had devised this what they call the speed puck, the Jofa speed puck. And it was like really striking looking. It was bright red, had these like resin knobs on each side, 6 of them, like in a hexagon. And it did a better job of gliding on the ground the way that an ice hockey puck would. So it improved the quality of hockey a lot. And so the thing was that everyone was extremely excited about was that they own the intellectual property of the puck. And so it was assumed and understood that as the league got popular, then street leagues would get popular and so forth. So they're like, imagine if the NBA got a royalty every time somebody bought a basketball. That was sort of the phrase that it was being whispered around. And so there was like this assumption that it was going to be like this big cash cow and it was going to fund a huge central office. I mean, by the way, 4 founding executives is a lot of people for a fledgling sports league. But then the puck thing actually blew up because one of the guys who owned the IP ended up registering the IP in his name only. So, oh, whoops, I forgot to include everybody else's name on this. So there was like this bad blood immediately in the center office. And Jeannie Buss, the Buss family owned the LA franchise, and she was often talking about this, that there was a lot of dysfunction and distrust that happened from that transaction.
Well, that's a page right out of the ABA book, right? The ball was the thing, that the red, white, and blue ball was it was almost like right out of this, right out of central casting for
Yeah,
this.
it makes sense. I don't, now that you mention it, we don't see those red, white, and blue balls anymore. And by the way, who owns that intellectual property? And I mean, can you actually claim that as IP?
Yeah, but that was part of his genius slash, shakiness in terms of business, right? So it's a very good example of.
But they did some things that I absolutely loved, and so one of them was the okay, so you paid $4,000 per game administrative fee to the league, and then you also paid, you being now in this case owner Rich, $96,000 for salaries. So imagine our costs for the season for the players was 96 grand for the whole season. Now, I mean, granted, it's like a 13-week season, so it's not a long season, but it's a pretty damn good deal, even in the early 90s, to pay less than 100 grand to basically have all of your staff. And by the way, no contract negotiations, no legal costs, none of that. And who knows what was going on with things like workers' compensation insurance? I have no idea. But the gist of it was the players were earning 180 bucks a game, uh, so long as their name was on the roster that got submitted to the league. The players were employees of the league, not the team. And so they would get paychecks from the league based on how many times their name was on each time the game was played, 180 bucks. And then there was a prize money pool for the playoffs. And I'm looking here at a media guide, and it basically says the least a player could make, this was in 1994, was $4,320 for the summer. The most a player could make was $13,506. And that difference, about $9,000 difference, was ratcheting up the prize money as you made it through the playoffs, and you would have had to have won the championship to get that full amount, and you would have had to have played every game.
I have to imagine that a lot of the players would sure wanted to get paid, but probably would just like the chance of playing quote unquote pro hockey on some level too, and or just to keep in shape for in between the ice seasons.
Well, I mean, the way it turned out was, so the year one RHI, the year before the Rhinos, the 12-team year,
93.
There were a mix between players who are sort of street hockey kids who are extremely good skaters and street hockey players, and then ice hockey players. Then there's a mix of those players, as well as some ice hockey players who crossed over from playing pro ice hockey, like in the minor leagues, and then they learned how to play it in the summer, basically never having played before or been on inline skates before. And the teams that invested in the ice hockey players kind of bullied the street kids. So year two, by the time we rolled around, our coach we hired was this guy Roy Sommer, who he's now become a sort of I think he's in a Hall of Fame for AHL as a ice hockey coach, but he was coaching a team in the East Coast Hockey League in the Richmond Renegades. And so he basically just he told us to draft his whole team essentially. And he also knew guys in his league who he liked. So he assembled most of his players and then a handful of people he liked, and he brought them all in. And none of them really had any roller hockey or inline skating experience at all. But so for them, it was like their alternative would be, hey, do you want to come to San Jose and hang with the guys and get paid a little bit of money, free housing? Or do you want to go home to Canada, most likely, and then work at a hockey camp somewhere? I mean, that's really their alternative.
Yeah, and that jives with a lot of fledgling leagues or new sports and that kind of stuff where, yeah, I mean, it's part of a polyglot sort of a gig, if you will, that you can kind of, but you won't starve, and you play, and you might get seen, and all. There's a lot of upside to it as well. But that's part of the genius, sort of keeping it cheap.
Absolutely. I mean, keeping it cheap was really the name of the game, and like I said, the owner was, he was a bit over his skis in terms of how much he was spending, because everybody underestimated how much revenue would come in, and it's always easy to forget about all of these costs that come up. And an example of the cost side on just on the player personnel side was we would have 12 players suiting up for the games. That was the official roster size. We played 4-on-4, not 5-on-5, and that created a lot more scoring and a lot faster skating and more excitement for the fans. So 12 people would suit up and get paid, but then you'd have a 3-person. It's common to have a 3-person what they call taxi squad, and those are just reserves ready to play if people are hurt. And guess what? People are getting hurt all the time. So the issue was that if you were on the taxi squad, you didn't get paid. So people were like, the players were like revolting, kind of like, hey, this is not cool because, it's not like you can't have them and they're working just as hard as everyone else. So they should get paid too. So they bullied our owner into coughing over out of his pocket money first he said, take it up with the league. They're like, yeah, right. We're taking it up with you. So he ended up having to cough up some extra money for that, which was just like par for the course. It was everywhere he turned around, there was always one more thing to pay for.
All right, what's this? Oldschoolshirts.com. Fantastic. You've heard me talk on and on and on about the great folks and the great wares at oldschoolshirts.com. Like the name implies, it's old school and it's shirts, and they put them together, into what they call oldschoolshirts.com. It's like the name implies, but of course we love them primarily for their sportswear. You name the league of the past, you name the team of the past, the chances are huge that they're going to have more than one shirt and different color schemes for things that you may remember from the United Football League or the Major Indoor Soccer League or various flavors of the original XFLs, plural, or the Federal League perhaps, or maybe World Team Tennis, or maybe it was the North American Soccer League, and on and on and on. But hey, it's not just sports. It's also great cultural touchstones and memories from the past. How about the officially licensed Evel Knievel connection? How about collection? Yeah, that's what he's trying to say. Various colleges. How about dead malls of the past? Ice cream parlors, maybe even radio stations that you might remember. Hey, even there's a latest edition of the now old, Aloha Stadium commemorative shirt. All that kind of stuff and more. You will find at least a handful of shirts that you will just transport you back into your past, and you will amaze and impress your friends at the same time. It's oldschoolshirts.com, and we got a promo code for you, of course. Let's save you some dough while you go there, and its promo code is Good Seats. Good Seats. That's the promo code at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code Good Seats for 10% off all of your purchases. Hey, P.F. Wilson and your friends at oldschoolshirts.com, thank you for your sponsorship of the show. And now, back to our conversation. Tell me about the San Jose Arena part of it. Like, was that a fait accompli? Was that already kind of done, and you didn't have to negotiate that? And
yeah, it was. It was, and there was already sort of an agreement. So, actually, Rich's dream, I think, was to own this team. But I think what he really also saw was he saw some easy money because he thought the franchise valuations were going to, basically balloon from the 55,000. So he understood that the smartest, that the most logical buyer of that would be the same ownership group that owns the San Jose Sharks and the arena. And by the way, they were also the owners of a brand new franchise called the San Jose Grizzlies, which was indoor soccer.
And that was my next question. I wanted to know that. Okay, so for those who don't know, and we've had some CISL conversations with Ronnie Weinstein, for example, the guy who ran the league for many years. The San Jose Grizzlies were part of the Continental Indoor Soccer League, which, like RHI, I'm assuming, right? The half of the logic for both of these was to get to enable arena owners to have stuff for the summer beyond concerts and their winter teams.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, basically, they're trying to fill up their building because they're making money when people are buying churros and paying for parking and having garlic fries. So the buildings are always looking for stable tenants to come in. And, we represented, I guess, 12 or 14 dates, which is not too shabby, but it's not, for them, they'd much rather have a tenant coming in like us paying our rent than having to own it and deal with all of the heartache of owning it. But I guess they were maybe, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but it was like, hey, maybe we'll try it both ways, own one team and then have Rich own the other team. Or maybe they just didn't buy the RHI license franchise. I don't know I'm not sure why it turned out that way, but he always thought that they should be the ones to buy. And in fact, they cut out a deal where it was like a landlord tenant relationship for the games, and use of the facilities, etc., everything else. And in part of that deal was that the Sharks had a first right of refusal to buy the team at a couple of different milestones, which they ended up never exercising that right, much to Rich's chagrin.
But was that kind of an understood logic with for other teams and the NHL as well, or just San Jose situation?
It must have been.
I had to think it had to be.
It must have been. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess if you could look at the LA franchise, you could say the same thing, right? So the Bus family owned the LA Blades, and they ran the Forum, and they owned the Lakers, right? So I think the model and I think, let me think about is there other ones? There must have been other ones as well. But I think that's what Rich sort of assumed would be. Look, he was a guy in his mid-50s living in Calgary. I mean, he had a midlife crisis, and instead of getting a fancy sports car, he bought a sports team. I mean, 55 grand. So he didn't have any illusions about, running and owning this thing for very long, I don't think. But so there's a friendly, it was a frenemy relationship with the building, because we were the tenants, obviously they were the landlords,
but
so we both wanted success.
Neither of these two propositions, though, right, were, I mean, how large was the arena? Is it 18, 19,000 seats?
Yeah, about 18,000. We only opened the lower bowl, which is like 9,000.
Okay, but even then, right? And then, I mean, I think the Grizzlies were only averaging 3,000-4,000 a game. I don't. What were you guys doing? And how do you sell now? Back to selling tickets. How do you sell the proposition? Because it's not quite hockey. It's not certainly outdoors. It's beautiful outside and summertime.
I know, right?
And
I know.
How's that go? What's the logic? How do you frame all?
Well, one of the big like assumptions that was faulty was we thought that the San Jose Sharks fans would be naturally interested in coming during the off season to the Rhinos game. So so people thought, well, we'll just set up a table at the Sharks games, and just rake in the money, and make announcements over the PA. Well, that didn't really work. People were not that interested in it. Then we were figuring, well, actually, this is a great way for families to go spend time because it's cheap. The tickets were like, I think that I'm looking at the ticket prices now. It was $8, $11, and $14 were the ticket prices. And of course, we're talking $90s, but even that was $8. That wasn't much more than going to the movies, and that's sometimes how we were trying to message it. The big problem was there was no messaging channels. Like, there's no way to get the word out at all, like literally at all. I mean, in the 90s,
right, because you couldn't afford it, or
right. Well, like, you couldn't afford it. I mean, like, what do you like a snail mail? Like, you could do like some sort of like brochure mailing to people in the neighborhood. Like, we could have done that, but we didn't have the budget to do that.
No newspaper or radio advertising and that kind of
Well,
stuff.
we did a bit of radio advertising, but I mean, like, those. I remember at the time it was like, even if you got like, I remember paying like $2,000 for like 10 spots, 10, whatever, prime time, drive time, and those. You're right. I mean, what you're talking about is the way you would do it, but it eats it up so fast, and you have no idea whether it's working or not. It's not like our phone was ringing off the hook. So we were trying everything, and editorial coverage in the newspaper was like prime real estate because those are sports fans. Like, back in those days, everybody who's listening to this who's of a certain age remembers that, I mean, the best part of the day was when the sports page arrived in your newspaper. So, whether you had a morning paper or an evening paper, it was like, great, the sports section's here and I can find out what happened. So getting coverage in the San Jose Mercury News was by far the most important thing we could hope for. And we tried everything to get them to send reporters out, but they were understandably, in retrospect, coy about the whole thing. in part because of the earlier part of our conversation, which was San Jose had worked their butts off to become seen as a legitimate real city with a real sports team in a major league. And then suddenly you had arena football. We haven't talked about that one yet, Tim, but there was
Oh,
the
was they there too?
they came in 94, I think.
So that season or the season
It might have been the season after. I mean, like the
got it. Yeah,
building
of
shows up and everybody wants in at that,
course.
at
Sure,
that
sure,
point,
sure.
right? So it was the arena football. So every night there was something hokey going on. And so the Mercury News, I think, took a editorial position around trying not to turn their sports page into a circus, which of course, made us feel like butthurt. And so then I was thinking, okay, well then the most legitimate way to be in the newspaper then is like in the box scores, or actually in the radio. Every day in the newspaper it would show there it would be the list of the radio broadcasts coming up. So the A's games and the Giants games in the summer, and then so it's like, well, we need to have the Rhinos games in that list. So we scrambled together and got. It was important for me that we had radio coverage because actually there was otherwise no other way to follow the team, especially when they were on the road. And so I ended up approaching KSJS, so San Jose State's radio station, and they were already broadcasting for the San Jose, what was it? It was the single A baseball team in San Jose, San Jose Giants. So they had a little bit of sports content on their station already, so I figured they would be potentially amenable. And eventually they agreed, although their objection was we don't have anybody to do the play-by-play, and it's summertime and nobody's around. And we're like, well, can't you find somebody? They're like, well, no, nobody who knows the game. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. Nobody knows the game. So we ended up settling on a deal, and I was just looking through came across the notes about it, and we paid them $1,000 a game. We had to pay for the travel of the play-by-play announcer, and then there was a question about who paid for the phone call. And they said, "Oh, you're gonna have to pay for the phone call." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean we have to pay for the phone call? Like, what phone call?" They're like, "Oh yeah. So whenever our guy is dialing for the broadcast, he'll just find a landline and do a phone call directly to our studio, and then we'll patch it through and broadcast it over the air." I'm like, seriously? This is like yeah. So you bring like a little, you bring like your little push button. It's not a rotary phone, but like the kind you just plug right in with the phone line, and then you get a little number. And I had to buy like a AT&T card, and the guy would have to punch in like 40 numbers to validate himself, and then be on the phone for like two hours. So yeah, there was.
Who's calling the games?
It's this guy, and I really wish I could remember his name. He was this redheaded kid from, I don't even know where he was from, but he was interested in getting involved in sports broadcasting. And so it's like, all right, buddy, well, it is your big chance. And then
You couldn't have been paying him much, if anything.
well, he didn't get paid. He just got to work on his, build his resume, I guess. But, of course, then Rich, the owner, was like, "What do you mean there's another person in the traveling party? That's what the hell is that? It's more air travel costs." Well, I had at the time Southwest Airlines, uh, they were testing that it was the beginning of the whole Friends Fly Free campaign that they would do. So there was an upstart airline that was a competitor to Southwest Airlines called Reno Air, who had a hub in Reno, and
Sure.
they serviced San Jose, LA, Vegas, um, and Portland, and some other places, and it matched enough of our cities that we were like, "Ooh, great!" So I got in touch with the guy who's a promotional guy there, and their tickets were. So he did a little bit of a sponsorship thing with us, and their tickets. I think the tickets were $49 each way, buy one get one free. So it was basically $25 a person per leg, and all the luggage we could bring, which actually was important because we had tons of hockey luggage. So as long as our traveling party was an even number, then it was we had 13. So it was like, hey, it's only 14. So he's going to go for free. So that was the pitch I made to Rich, and he said that was fine as long as it didn't go to 15.
So, all right. So, what were these trips like? Because I mean, you're not just going to the regions, although there were a lot of. I would argue that it's kind of top heavy on the western part of the
Yeah. So yeah.
we're talking like the New Jersey Rock and Rollers, right? The Montreal Roadrunners and the
Well, this was
Buffalo
also
Stampede, right?
the smarts of the league founders. I mean, they basically created the geographical conferences, and then they didn't have any interconference play. So we only played teams on the West Coast. So the teams we were playing, our 95 schedule. I'm looking at it now is there's franchises in Oakland and Sacramento. We played in Phoenix, Vancouver, San Diego, and let's see, LA, Oklahoma, Anaheim. So
So the
there's
only
a
time you
couple.
guys could come into contact with them would be through the playoff system near the end.
Exactly. That's right. So the travel. I mean, yeah, I did the local travel because I could drive to a couple of those places, but I never went on the team travel. And like actually, our first year, so we were scrambling to get people in the business into the door. You were asking about how we did on attendance. I think our opening night we got 3,500 fans. And that was after like nonstop promoting all summer. And it was a Sunday night, like, oh man, 3,500. Okay, we were expecting 4+ or whatever. Um, the next game was a week from that Tuesday, and we drew 24-73. So that was rough. And we won both of those games. So we were 2-0, and then the team goes on their first road trip. And the league rules were that the owners had to provide a per diem of $25 a day per player for when they're on the road. And then the other thing that the league did that was great was they said the home team always has to provide the hotels for the visiting team. And so that was good because it meant the local people could do deals with one hotel for the whole season as opposed to trying to call ahead and manage all of this stuff from afar. So, the big expense of the road trip was the flights, obviously, but then the per diems, right? So, anyway, I went to the bank and I got a whole wad of cash and I had envelopes and it was like a 4-day trip, so it was like $100 a person in all these envelopes, and I handed them all out carefully to each person. I wrote their names on it and gave them out, and off they went. And then I said, "Hey," to the trainer Rob Jonesy and to the coach Roy. It's like, "Hey, stay in touch. Like, let us know how it goes. Like, call in and tell us what the score is at least." Because then there was even no way Tim to even know whether we won. Like, literally, they would go on a road trip, and then it was like, "Hey, unless somebody calls us, we're not going to know if we won or not." It's hard to imagine.
What a crazy way to run a league.
I know. Well, I mean, like it just wasn't guaranteed. I didn't, the San Jose Mercury News wasn't covering it. Like, the radio stations I was listening to wasn't covering it. There's no way to know. So, they come back, and of course the first game we went to Vegas and we beat it. We won again. So we're 3-0, which is great. And then we're going to San Diego for our fourth game, and we lose 8-7 in a shootout. And San Diego was known to be probably the weakest team we'd played so far. So it was a bad loss. And they came in and they flew back and I met them up the next day in the locker room. And the coach and the trainer are like grousing around. And I'm like, so what happened? And they're like, and then I hear like coach says, "Hey, Brad, did you give those guys their per diems?" I'm like, "Yeah, I gave them the per diems." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then the trainer goes, "Hey, Brad." I'm like, "What?" He goes, we ran out of power bars. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I gave you like 5 cases of power bars for the season." And he's like, "They're gone." I was like, "What is going on?" They're just like, it felt like they're accusing me of something. And then the coach goes, "Next time, give me the per diems and I'll give them out every day." I'm like, okay, fine. I'm like, no big deal. Like, but tell me what's going on. Yeah. So everybody but one guy lost all his money in Las Vegas on the very first night. So nobody had any money and nobody had any food. And so by day 4, when they played San Diego, they lost 8-7 in overtime. They were just totally out of gas, had no energy, were completely anemic, and lost badly when they should have won. So I was like, okay, that's what we're dealing with here. 22-year-old kids who can't be trusted with budgeting their food money. Got
Yeah,
it.
and the hockey dynamic, right? I mean, they're kind of rough and tumble kind of guys, and it's probably a lot of the minor leaguers and stuff on the ice and stuff too. And it's a hand to mouth existence back in the day.
Totally, but one guy had all the money. I mean, they were playing poker with each other. I think one dude hoovered up a
Not
lot of the
helpful.
money. Not helpful.
So tell me. So you mentioned I didn't realize this. I didn't know that the Oakland Skates were also in the league when you were playing. And I did know of the Sacramento River Rats.
Wow, that's
So
good
the
knowledge.
well, okay, well, that's about as far as it. But I mean, like the Oakland Skates, is that? I mean, is that a good thing to have a team so close to you in terms of market share and all that kind of stuff? Or was it a
We
rivalry that, theoretically or maybe in the real world was actually helpful, a derby, so to speak, and or Sacramento?
It could have been helpful if they would have been, they were also new the same year we were joining. So we were sort of fighting for attention and geographically from a fan base, it doesn't make that much of a difference because it's probably 35, 40 miles through a trafficy corridor. So it's not like people are going to be it didn't feel competitive from a fan perspective, but it did. The problem was is they were drawing. They had at least we had the arena. Like we had the San Jose Arena, which was a good draw in and of itself. They had the Oakland Coliseum, which was just sort of a tired and dingy building. So we had the advantage, and so we were drawing better than them, even though we only were drawing like the number I mentioned was. I mean, we were by the end we were in the 3 or 4 thousand range, but they were doing worse. So it was not like you didn't want how it is with a rivalry. You want to be rivals with the more popular team, and they were the less popular team. So the rivals that we had were the Anaheim Bullfrogs, who had won the league the year before. They were riding the wave of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks thing. They're playing in the same building there, and they drew well. They had like a 10, 11,000 fans in their building, and we hated their owners. They were slick salesman types, and they were cheating, and they were paying their players extra money, all sorts of stuff. So those were our rivals, not so much Oakland. I think Oakland and Sacramento maybe tried to have a bit of a rivalry, but we didn't want any part of it.
What kind of crowd size did you need to break even and or start to make money?
Well, it would have been probably realistically, if we could average 5,000 fans a game, we could have held on more sustainably. And that gap between 2,000, 2,500 to 3,500 to 5,000, we bridged it a couple times. Actually, one of the games was against Vancouver, and it was televised on ESPN2. So ESPN2 had just launched, and they were hungry for content because they're like, what are we going to put on this? There's so much airtime, 24 hours. What are we going to do? So RHI did a deal with them, and we were the game of the week, one of the games, and it was like a good night. They brought it because the game, so our floor was the concrete. We played on the concrete that was below the ice that the Sharks played on. So it was like this smooth, gray, dingy, hard, bulletproof, shiny concrete. So for TV, the ESPN people required us to use this thing called Sport Court, which was too expensive for us, but somebody brought it in on our behalf anyway because it was just going to showcase the product better. So they brought it in, and it was a good night. We brought in bunch of fans, but then about I don't know, like the morning of the game, the producer from ESPN comes and finds me, and he's like, "Hey, so you're gonna have to move all of your fans from their seats where they're sitting and move them all into seats that are opposite our cameras." And we're like, "No way." And like he's like, and they're like, no, this is totally normal. Like, it'll look way better on TV if it looks like it's twice as full as what you're gonna have anyway. I'm like,
Classic
no.
move, right? Classic.
I'm like, no way. I'm not moving my fans. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, this is their seats. Like, you can't just say, guess what? And then I have them facing a whole bunch of empty seats. I'm like, no way. So they were pissed at that. And then I said, all right, listen, we'll make a compromise. I'll tell the box office to sell all of the walk-up tickets in the sections that are across from the cameras. And actually, it was a good enough of a draw that night that it turned out to be probably our best attendance. And it was like this, very vibrant atmosphere, national television, everything else. And that gave me a glimpse of like, yeah, this could work, but that was sort of perfect conditions.
How are the other teams doing though? Were they even approaching that sort of magical, I don't know, 5,000? I'm sure they had different economics, but I mean,
Well,
this league lasted for a handful of years, but with 24 teams that season in '94 and stuff, and was yours the exception or the rule
it's a great question, and it's one that I've often sort of wondered and thought about, and I think the reality is that the league wanted every team to inflate our attendance numbers. So back to the Dennis Murphy conversation, like it was in everybody's best interest, as far as they were concerned. Like if we had 3,500 fans in the stands, why would we not report that we had 6,000 fans? Like, why wouldn't you? That was sort of the pressure that the league put on us. And the reason we wouldn't was because our building landlord relationship with the San Jose Arena depended on the number of people who went through, and the fewer people who went through, the less money we had to pay. So we weren't going to do that. And the Mercury News also was extremely clear, which was like, if you, there was sort of, it was clear that they were like, if you're going to be exaggerating your attendance, then that proves that you're a low end sport, and like nobody does that. So, we were always reporting our actual numbers, whereas lots of the other teams in the league were reporting the puffier numbers, which I would have been fine with, but it wasn't we weren't going to do it. So when they published the results of the attendance, we were always like, I think we were like seventh or eighth out of 24. But I remember thinking like, and Rob and our
So
Jonesy,
those
our
real
trainer,
real numbers or amongst the inflated numbers? Or
well, so our numbers were real, and we never knew what the other numbers were. And what our coach Roy and the trainer Jonesy would say was, "Oh, Brad, they said they had so and so numbers, but we have way more fans than they do." So I think it's just impossible to know. But nobody was getting enough fans to really make it.
even with that ESPN2 deal and that kind of stuff, it was the buzz wasn't, because I remember watching those games on ESPN2 and with no letters capitalized. It was fun to watch.
What was funny was they actually called ESPN one, they actually called it ESPN one. I don't know if you remember that, but when ESPN2 came out, they changed the name of ESPN to ESPN one.
I don't
And then
remember.
they
I could
and
have
then
been
they
too
dropped
long.
they dropped the one when they realized they didn't need the one. But so I mean, look, those games. I appreciate that you remember that because it was on for 5 seconds and then it was off. The thing is, the season's kind of short, so it is a bit hard to build that sort of momentum of fan interest as well. So that was a bit of the problem for the league, but I think playing in these gigantic vacuous buildings. I mean, like we played in the arena, and the LA Blades played in the LA Forum, and the Skates played in the Oakland Coliseum, and so on. The Montreal team played in the old where the Canadians
Form.
played,
Yeah.
right? In the Forum, exactly. So, I mean, in a way, that gave us a lot of like stature and glitz, but on the other hand, it created a really it's vacuous. And by the way, I was listening to your great interview with Crazy George Henderson, and he one of the points he makes, and he's like the world's, for people who haven't heard that episode, you should, but he's basically famous for riling up the crowds and being like the world's professional cheerleader, or only one. But he made a point in the conversation with you, which is that back then we didn't have the all of the blaring systems and the screens and the speakers and all of the atmosphere creating um, technology that you have in these arenas today. Like, it just didn't exist. So when you'd have a stoppage in play in an 18,000 seat arena with 2,500 people, 500 of whom are getting a hot dog or taking a leak, it's a little stuffy. So I mean, the experience, we had to try to come up with ways to improve the experience. And actually, one of the things that was pretty successful would be we invited our fans to skate on the floor after the game. So you got to bring your own skates and then lace them up and off you go. And the arena hated it. They're like, oh no, like security problems, and like, what if somebody twists their ankle or hits their head or goes into cardiac arrest? Like, they were like full of like, yeah, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. So they're like, everybody, come on. So it
Well,
was a little bit
that
anything
leads me
goes.
to that's actually leads me to my last sort of hornet's nest of questions and stuff, which is around the realm of promotions, right? Because what I'm hearing in all of this is um a desire, but almost sort of an implicit need to emulate the quote unquote big leagues, right? I mean, you guys had a dance team called the
The
Rhinestones, right?
rhinestones.
Right. You
Yes.
had you have a whole chapter devoted to the Burger King promotional thing, and there's the idea of having a radio coverage of the games, even though that probably was hard to put that, not you weren't going to pay a guy to do it even. But a lot of that feels aspirational. Now, again, I recognize like where this is coming from. Larry King, not the one a certain generation remembers, but the former husband of Billie Jean King, and Dennis Murphy, and those clearly they come from challenging the major leagues, right? But RHI, right, doesn't have the blessing of the NHL. None of the teams of the NHL are related or partnered, although in hindsight, that might have made some sense despite sharing the same buildings, which is kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But it just seems like you're trying to, how can I best put it? Puff up, something that arguably would take a lot more time to do at that level.
You're definitely right on one point, but I think the other point to remember is like, so there was pressure from the league to try to emulate the big leagues. There's pressure from everybody wanted that, but the thing is if you think about going to minor league sports team games, it'd be inexcusable not to try to make it as like exciting and energizing and sort of fan oriented as you possibly could, and to try to create that excitement and enthusiasm. And in fact, I think probably one of the reasons why people love minor league sports, of the people who do, is because there is that kind of campy, like hustle culture that's sort of around it. We were doing things like, trying to get people to. I had this idea that we had an international slew of players coming in. And so it'd be like, hey, there's a guy from Sweden going to be on the team we're playing. So let's sing the Swedish national anthem that game. And then we'll find somebody in the local community who can sing it. And then they'll bring in all the Swedes from the area. It's like whatever we could think of, we would try.
Sounds very minor league baseball.
Exactly. So I guess, yeah, it's interesting to your point about whether it's like trying to be too major league. I think there were some examples of that. And one of them was Sports Channel Pacific was a TV competitor to ESPN that was brand new. And they were also looking for content. So they were eager to do a bunch of games and on TV. And we're like, oh man, I mean, like, what doesn't say you're big time if you have like TV coverage? That was like amazing. People who are growing up watching sports now can't even imagine, like, because everything's on, every game's on now. But I mean, then it was a huge deal, even as like an A's fan, if a game was being televised, like, oh, that's great. What a great surprise. So TV was like, wow. And we did a deal with Sports Channel Pacific, and that was a regional one. They did some games with us. They did some Oakland games and some Sacramento games. The problem is they wanted to broadcast our home games. They liked broadcasting from the arena. It looked good on TV. And we're like, we don't want you to broadcast our home games. We want you to broadcast our away games, So, yeah, I think those are good examples of, like, for sure we were trying too many things. But there really wasn't ways to get the word out. And you referenced that Burger King chapter, and it is one of the funnier sort of moments. And I don't know if you have time for it, but I can.
Yeah, give it away, but don't give it away, right? Because we want people to buy the book too.
Well, I mean, if they do or they don't, if you like the conversation, you'll like the book. Let's put it that way. And I'm not spoiling too much. And I think that the story is indicative of the moment. Because there was like really no way to get attention. Like one of the promotions that I cooked up with the guy who was a regional Whopper franchisee owner, and he headed up a group of other franchisees owners. Between them, they had about 35 Burger Kings in the area right around our arena. And so I was like, well, I want to get the schedule. Like, one of the big promotional items we used to give away was the pocket schedule, which fit in your wallet, right? This is like the thing. If you have to remember what the 90s were like, it's like you didn't have these digital devices and calendars. But if you had like, oh, I wonder when the Rhinos games are, and you pull out your wallet and you have your little wallet-sized game schedule, like, that's solid gold, with the phone number, the 800 number, 1-800-20-Rhinos, etc. So we did a deal where I really wanted to get tons of those printed and tons of those distributed. And so they agreed to do one where there's a whole bunch of elements to it. And one of them was that they would put our game program on the tray liners of all the foods that they gave out for like a month, which was like unbelievable. And then there was they put up these stands at the cash registers to allow people to know about it. And we thought, okay, the Burger King going crowd with the young kids and families, like this is perfect. They'll have a chance to take their kids to the arena. It'll be awesome. It'll be huge. Um, in return, we also created they wanted foot traffic to the store. So we agreed to a promotion that if the Rhinos scored 8 or more goals, then the ticket stub was redeemable for a free Whopper in any of these retail locations within the first 2 days. So great. And then I calculated, what the right number of goals would be, and about half the time we scored 8 or more. So it was about half. And then, I was doing some math on the redemption of that, and it was like, oh yeah, these guys they're never going to, it's going to be less than 50 Whoppers redeemed, I'm sure. So as we get later and later in the season, there's one guy who owns one of the Burger Kings, and he's upset about it. He's hassling the other main Burger King guy who's calling me. He's like, yeah, it's not working for him. Like there's too many redemptions. And like, I'm like, well, what's going on? Well, it turned out I had been giving the players tickets to promote themselves when they're going out on the town. I was imagining them meeting other 20-year-old kids around in San Jose and promoting the Rhinos. So I gave every player 4 tickets who wanted them. And so gradually, as the season progressed, every player started asking me for their 4 tickets. And I was like, oh, this is great. That's going great. Everything's going so good. And then I went down to the section in the arena where the players' tickets were, because I wanted to go see what kind of people were coming that they're giving tickets away to. And it was totally empty. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. And then we scored 8 goals to get the requisite number of goals for the free Whopper, and the crowd goes wild. And then the Rhinos, the players are like pretty excited, and they're like getting into it. And I'm like, that's so cool. They're so into it. Well, it turns out they were basically into it because for them it was like 4 free Whoppers. They would get 2 the next day and then 2 the following day. So they would go to practice. Then they would go to this Burger King, order like 36 Whoppers for free. No, because the Burger King people wanted there to be like, you got to buy fries, you got to buy a Coke and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, no, 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 no. You got to keep it super simple. 8 in the net, a Whopper you get. So that was the promotion. They finally agreed to that, and yeah, the players were the ones who probably, they would get 56 Whoppers in 2 days, and the franchisee owner was not happy.
I think that's great, but that's just that comes with the territory, right? I mean, especially when somebody like you, so young and wet behind the ears, so to speak, and you're trying everything, right? I mean, you have to do. You've heard this story before with fledgling leagues and all that kind of stuff. You got to be inventive, you got to be entrepreneurial, and you got to try stuff, right? And
maybe I could just interject. Yeah, maybe I could just interject there that the book is certainly about all of these stories, and I've told a bunch of them, and there's more. But it is exactly, Tim, what you were just saying, and that is that that was an era where that was required of the situation, but as I've had other people read the book and I've connected with it, so many people have said, oh, a lot of those stories resonated for me. Like it was a different version of the same kind of a story because so many people lived that era and had to figure out how to improvise through life. And one of the big theses of the book is that, as Generation X, we were a generation and the only generation in the history of human history who straddled both sides of the technology revolution as an adult. So we were young adults before technology took over everything, and then it did, and now we're past it, and we had to sort of navigate that chasm. And so the book is also about remembering that era, the pre-technology era, which was not that long ago, but also celebrating a superpower that a generation has to be flexible, improvise, and make things up as you go and be resourceful. And that's where the pun of the title of the book, Roll With It, comes into play, because it's obviously a roller hockey story, but it's also about rolling with it and just dealing with whatever comes your way.
All right, 2 more questions and I'm going to let you promote. So number 1 is, when did you kind of know, both personally and more broadly with the league, that this might not be a long future for you and or it?
Well, I sort of bounced out before it fizzled out. So the league actually continued on. I was basically involved for the 94 season and 95. So it was our first 2 seasons and the second and third years of RHI. the league
And the
continued, I think,
championship, by the way, in
won
'94.
the championship,
Yeah,
won,
that's fantastic.
which is another part, another interesting part of the story, and a funny part of the story. But so I mean, for me, it was sort of like I was done and I was ready to move on. And I think I had scratched that itch to go back full circle to the beginning of my journey. It was like I thought I wanted to be in the world of sports, and I began to, over a period of time, realize that that really wasn't for me. And so even as much, it's like almost I got too much too fast, and then it took the fun out of it somehow. And there's a couple things I talk about in the book, and I think when it comes to like this insight that I had around the fact that I didn't necessarily, I don't know what, that I felt jaded, I guess. And one of those stories was about when the Sharks were making their run in the playoffs, and I needed them to lose because we were trying to get the Rhinos started, and we needed to melt the ice so we could practice on the actual rink. And then the Sharks went on this Cinderella story playoff run, and they beat the Detroit Red Wings, who are the number one seed in the 7 game series, and then they came 1 centimeter, one fraction of an inch away from beating the Maple Leafs in round two. And I was like, I had a lump in my throat. I was cheering so hard against the Sharks to win. I wanted them to lose so badly because it was going to make my life miserable if they won. And I thought to myself, man, it was just a few months ago when, this was my team. This was like, I was like fully all in on it. And then I realized, oh, like this is business, and the business is the business, and this is my job. And once I had that realization, then it sort of took the novelty and the specialness around being like, oh, it's going to be fun to have a career in sports, to saying, well, it's just a career. And then in the end, it took away my real passion for having seen behind the curtain just enough. It sort of took away my passion for it. And I'm fine with it. I'm totally at peace with it. But it was an interesting observation. And so for me, it was like, I'm going to jump out. I had gotten into business school, and so I departed. And then it hung in there a little longer. And then what's interesting, just to finish that out, the guy who was our goaltender named John Gustafson, he replaced me as the general manager after I left. So he migrated from a player to then the GM, and now he's had a incredible career within the San Jose Sharks organization, runs a huge operation for them, a big facility, and has had just a wonderful career. So, it was like for him, like that's his whole life, and he's awesome at it. And for me, it was sort of like I was a tourist. Let's put it that way.
All right, here's my last question then. And all this has been really cool. It's the league, that your situation. It's just to me this is why we do this show. I love it.
I'm
If
glad.
you so I guess it's sort of a combo question, but I mean, do you think that this league and your time there could happen now? In some respects, I look at like we're in an era right now as we record this, right? Like private equity and all it's an asset class now, sports, right? Even
Yeah.
even the third or fourth volleyball or pickleball league, right? And everybody's sort of getting in, trying to get their franchises in, and they're holding on, and they all think it's going to go to straight up and to the right. Um, but this is why partially we do these conversations, because these things are very cyclical. And I guess the question in there is, number one, it's a two-part question, right? Number one, do you think this kind of scenario could exist again today? And number two, do you miss it enough where you might want to jump back into this realm, or is it too far gone now because it's so
Two is easy for me because and maybe they're related, but I say two is easy, which is I don't have that desire. It's sort of like a scratch that itch, I guess. Um, but it is actually super fun for me when I see other teams doing it, or at least other entities doing it. But look, I think the difference now between now and then is the money. I made a big point earlier on our conversation that the franchise fee was $55,000 to buy a sports team. I mean, compare that to what's happening now in the realm of sports. I mean, it's just like it's just a different order of magnitude and then some. So, you know, to answer your question, like, could this sort of happen again? Not in the low end. I don't know, not in the low end kind of way. I guess I'm not sure which part of what is it that you're exactly asking? Which part
Yeah,
could
I
happen?
guess I'm just saying, can you see roller hockey international indoor
Oh,
in the summer and frankly, people like you coming out of college after a year or two and basically being thrown into a general management role where you have to manage this stuff by the seat of your pants.
well,
It
I
seems
think
to
I
me
think
like
one
it
of
might have been a period of time that maybe just won't happen again.
yeah, I think that's an easier question to answer, which is that unfortunately I don't think it will happen again. And a part of it is just that it's too easy to get information and like transparency. We benefited from things being hard to find out. So I was talking about how we couldn't even find out what the score was of the game. So imagine like that's just shocking. But it also meant that we didn't know how to do lots of other stuff either, including finding people who had relevant experience for a job like this. So I could never have gotten this job nowadays because it'd be so easy to find somebody who would have the actual experience to and qualifications to have that job. I had no qualifications for that job. Like how that could never happen again because someone like me would never get hired because it would be so easy just to post somewhere online and then next thing you know, you have somebody who's actually capable of doing it. So I think that sandbox free-for-all playground that existed in that environment won't exist anymore. And again, I think the access to information and things like legal and insurance and all these types of things also wouldn't permit it. I mean, the kind of stuff we were doing was extremely risky. I was paying for like basically petty cash for this whole team out of a bank account in my name with my social security number on it because I didn't know any better. Because Rich lived in Canada, we needed like spending money to pay for stuff like fueling up the vans that we had bartered from Volkswagen to move the players around, and needed to get paid. And so I paid that out of my out of a bank account in my name. I mean, my God, how stupid could I have been? Like, luckily nothing bad happened, but that kind of stuff just wouldn't happen now.
All right, and the very last question: do you think roller hockey as a sport could come back? The product itself, right? I mean, it's interesting how it's never really come back per se.
I wonder. I
Yeah, I mean,
wonder.
do you think it could? Or is
Um,
that just lost to time as well because of the era and the situation and that kind of stuff?
It does sort of feel like it missed its moment. I don't hear about people thinking about it again, and I don't, even back then, it would be pretty common to see people playing pickup roller hockey on basketball courts, out in parks and this kind of thing. And I'm not seeing a ton of that happening just organically. So I do think that there was a chance to catch lightning in a bottle. I mean, I guess it wouldn't surprise me if somebody gives it another try, but I don't know. I don't think so, Tim.
All right, let me just put down my glass here of Zima, and let's go back into the real world of 2025, shall we? And thank you to Brad for an amazing leap back into the 1990s. Where is the Murphy Cup? I'd like to know, anybody in our audience who might know. It seems to have defied everyone's best efforts to find, I guess it was the one and only and kind of passed along year by year. I don't know if it was a separately issued one and by the handful of teams that won that championship. But if you know anything about it, you know where to contact us. Our email is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And of course, we'll, we can try to, it takes a village, and we need to get an entire village perhaps trying to on the scene to sort of figure out where this Murphy Cup and the RHI Championship hardware might be about. But until then, you can revel in the book. It is called Roll With It, a trip back to the 90s, Gen X style, by our guest this week, Brad Porteus. It is available, as they say, wherever good books are found, but probably most quickly and in the most magnanimous way by going to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. All you have to do is search up this episode, if it's not already there on the front page, numbered 399 with me and Brad, and you'll find a couple of convenient links to both the paperback and Kindle versions. and you'll get it as fast as humanly possible. Amazon's pretty darn good at that. And you will love it, as I did, as well as this conversation. You can also find Brad's musings on his little blog site there at Porteus, Porteus.com. We, of course, encourage you to follow our show wherever you might. If you haven't been subscribed or following us on your favorite podcast feeders or catchers or whatever, by all means do so. If you have been and you have yet to rate and review this show, preferably with a 5-star rating. Sure, we take constructive criticism, and yes, we know we're long-winded, but we love these topics. So, sorry, but where else are you going to get this San Jose Rhinos roller hockey stuff? Come on. But we, of course, appreciate every listen we can get. Please tell your friends, especially if you think they might enjoy our little excursions into the oddities of professional sports history. And let's see, you can follow us on all the socials. We're most active on Blue Sky. You'll find us there at goodseatsstillavailable.com. On Twitter X, you'll find us at goodseatsstill. And you will find us at just about every other social location at goodseatsstillavailable, all one word, including, by the way, YouTube, where you can also download, stream, or however other ingest these shows. We publish there as well. Again, our email address is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And thank you, as always, to our great listeners, such as yourselves, and to our pal Jerry Payne for his audio excellence this week. And as I record this, some rumors that there is a new arena being envisioned for the metropolitan Atlanta area, specifically focused on perhaps trying to lure the NHL back to Atlanta for the count at third time. So hopefully he's getting all excited and giddy about that. We'll check in with him and see if his pulse is racing. Until next week, yes, it's going to be our episode 400. It'll be a doozy. I promise you that. You'll want to make sure that you're subscribed and ready to go for that. And we'll look forward to seeing you then. Bye.